Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Melissa from the Royal Voluntary Service, and thank you for joining us for Mindspace Week this week at the Virtual Village Hall. So this week we're marking World Mental Health Day by exploring the NHS's 5 steps to mental wellbeing with a programme of activities to enjoy at home. The NHS steps to mental wellbeing are 5 evidence-based steps that we can take to improve our mental health and wellbeing, to help us feel more positive and get more out of life. Now, one of these steps is to give to others through acts of giving and kindness. And one way to do that is to volunteer in your local community. I'm joined today by volunteer Juliet Mosney, who will be sharing her experience of volunteering and its impact on her mental wellbeing. Hi Juliet, thank you so much for joining us today on the Virtual Village Hall.
You're very welcome.
Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of volunteering you do, please?
Okay, so I have been an NHS Volunteer Responder, and I've been doing that since the start of the pandemic.
Oh, brilliant. Could you tell us a bit about what being an NHS Volunteer Responder involves?
Okay, so there are quite a few different roles which you can choose which you want to do, and you can add them, you can take them away depending on your situation. So I initially started doing the check-in and chat, which meant that I got an alert and I could be speaking to anyone anywhere in the country, just to really see how they were coping with the pandemic. A lot of people wouldn't have spoken to anyone else for some time, and then we could also signpost them if they needed help with any shopping or collecting prescriptions, which was actually one of the other roles I did as well. So that was called a community responder. I've recently added in being a vaccine steward, so I can go and help just with marshalling and directing people at the different vaccine centres. And I also signed up to do some transport roles. So that was either to transport patients to and from hospital appointments or to transport medical equipment. So things like the pulse oximeters and blood pressure monitors. So really, really varied. And you could choose you could just do one of those roles or you could do all of them.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. It sounds like plenty to keep you busy as well. A great way to give back to others in your community, I guess. What made you want to start volunteering during the pandemic?
Well, I remember seeing the really serious announcements from the government on the news, and I think it was Matt Hancock who talked about the needing an army of volunteers, and that led me to Google it and to see what I could do to help with that. And it was just, I just felt it was my chance to do something to help. And I was able to give the time. I live on my own, so actually the lockdown itself it appeared quite daunting for me, just at the thought of being stuck inside my own 4 walls. So it was just a real opportunity for me to step out and to help local people. And I know there were other schemes that did that too, but this was the one that I chose to do.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you for everything that you've been doing, Juliet. Can I ask you to tell us a bit more about what you feel that you get out of being a volunteer?
Okay, so I think we all feel the need to feel valued and to feel that we're making a difference. And that's something that has really come through the volunteering. It's allowed me to make positive use of my time. So at the moment, I'm unable to work because of my own health issues. And that's what's been brilliant about this NHS volunteering scheme, because I can dip in and out as my health allows me to. I think especially at the start of lockdown, when we were only restricted to being outside once a day, in a slightly selfish way, it meant I was able to get out more. And some of those occasions I was actually able to walk, which meant that I really benefit from being outside in nature. I live in Salisbury in Wiltshire, which is a beautiful place. And so to be able to get outside and just have time enjoying the outdoors and helping other people really boosted me. And I think it just helped me to feel valued and that I could make a difference to people. And it was really obvious to me in the encounters that I had that I was making a huge difference. And it actually didn't require a huge amount of my time. And so, for example, just arranging to pick up someone's prescription, really quick process, obviously just hand it over safely with all the PPE regulations and everything just on the doorstep. But it was interesting how people did want to chat, and I sometimes did have the time, as well as delivering their medicines, just to be able to have a quick chat with them. So many positives, both for me and for the clients.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly rewarding. Could you talk to us about the impact that volunteering might have had on your own mental well-being specifically?
Yeah, I think I used to be a teacher, and I really missed that interaction with people, with not only the pupils, but also my colleagues, with the parents. And so I really miss engaging with people and to be on my own through the pandemic. And I think when I remember hearing the Prime Minister and watching him speak at 8 o'clock the first time he announced that we had to stay indoors. And I was already struggling a little with my mental health because of my health issues. And to then hear that my parents live half an hour away and I normally see them, and the thought of not being able to see them. And I think as well, I always think the way that I look after my own parents, I would hope other people would look after other people. And so many people in our communities don't have that family support. But equally, it's not just old people that we help. So I was able to help young people, maybe single families, or even just families who were having to isolate because they were unwell with COVID. We were able to collect their shopping. And so sometimes it was as simple as they organised the click and collect, and I literally just went to Tesco's and got it for them, again, leaving it on the doorstep to make sure we were safe. So it really, really helped me to feel valued and to feel that I had a role to play in this very scary time.
That's so important, so valuable. I can tell that volunteering really has had quite an impact on your own life as well during these, like you say, very challenging times.
It has. And also one other thing is that although I was volunteering as an individual, and actually I haven't come across anyone else in Salisbury who I know that is doing the scheme, but I know that people have, because on the app it shows us that where the other volunteers are. I still felt part of a team, and to me that's really important too. So even though I was going solo with my volunteering, I really did feel part of a team.
Oh, absolutely. It's a nice sense of community, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on that note, what would you say to other people who perhaps might have never considered volunteering before?
I think sometimes you worry that you have to give a big commitment, and I know everyone's so busy, and so perhaps people feel that they just haven't got the time to do it. But this type of volunteering is generally referred to as micro-volunteering, and so I had the ability to go on duty, off duty, whenever it suited. So actually over Christmas I was really poorly myself, so I wasn't on duty for quite a few weeks. Obviously I missed doing that. As soon as I was able to, I went back on duty, but I didn't feel that I was letting anyone down because there were other people in the area to pick up those tasks. So I think it's understanding that with volunteering you don't have to give a huge commitment, and so it can be just really little things. And like I said, just making a phone call. Sometimes if people didn't want to chat on the check-in and chat, it's interesting though, sometimes you're able to sort of break through that initial barrier at the start, and then they didn't want to stop the conversation. But I think what would it take? 15, 20 minutes of a phone call that could mean the world to someone and perhaps be the only person they've spoken to in a very long time. And so it helped. We refer to them as clients, but it really helped all the people that we've supported to know that they weren't forgotten and to know that they were being supported. So it made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it can be so flexible, volunteering, can't it? Which is, really interesting. So it's It's been great to hear about your volunteering experience, Juliet. Thank you for sharing that. I know that some of our listeners have submitted some questions, so thank you everyone for these. Let's start with this one. So Eleanor has asked us, she says, "Hi Juliet, has there been a standout moment for you whilst volunteering?"
There have been quite a few actually, but I think it's when you make that call and they say, "Oh, I didn't know I would get a response so quickly. I only made the call to ask for help today, and it came through that quickly." I had a standout moment in a sad way as well, because one of the clients that I had supported frequently, and because I have enhanced DBS, which was needed for some of the roles, so it wasn't needed for all of them, but for some of them with the more vulnerable clients, we did have that. And very sadly, one of the people that I had supported frequently, he died during the course of my volunteering. And that really did hit me, because you do build up a rapport with these people, especially if you have done some repeats. So with the roles that you don't have DBS, you are restricted in how many times you can support the same person. And I think the whole scheme was designed that people didn't become dependent on us. And so we were able to help like in the short term, but it was really important. The people I've supported didn't just expect me to be helping them all the time, because as I've said, there were some times when I couldn't. But I think just those conversations on the doorsteps when you deliver a prescription and they say, "I can't," and they wanted to give me money, they wanted to give me petrol money, they wanted to give me a gift, a bottle of wine or something, and they just couldn't understand that I was happy to do that, to help them for no reward at all. And so it really was just those responses that meant the world.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like you've made some lovely connections as well throughout your volunteering experience. Do you have a favourite role? Abby has asked. So she says, "Hi Juliet, which role as an NHS Volunteer Responder do you most enjoy and why?"
Okay, so I think the community response was my favourite, because that was the role where you do the shopping or you do the collection of prescriptions. Those did still have their challenges, because if you're picking up a controlled drug, you have to actually, there's another layer of questions that have to be asked. I had some fascinating shopping lists that I had to work my way through, and you speak to the person on the phone first and collect the list from them. And so it was, some of the times it was hard to read their writing, or they specifically wanted McVitie's digestives and not the other ones. So it was quite involved at times. But I think in the midst of the hardest part of the pandemic, for people to know that they had food for the week and to know that their vital medications had been delivered, for me was the most rewarding. But I've started doing the stewarding for the vaccines. And again, I have really enjoyed that. It's fascinating. So many anxious people queuing up for their vaccines, young and old. And it's been really, really amazing to again know that we can step in to make sure that incredible vaccine rollout happens. So I enjoy all of it.
It sounds like you do, and the steward role in particular. What an incredible thing to do! You're making history, I think, there, aren't you? If you're volunteering in that role. That's brilliant. We've got another question from Catherine here, who says, "Do you get support as a volunteer if you have difficult times whilst you're on duty?"
That's a brilliant question, and obviously they're sometimes on phone calls, or even the gentleman who I mentioned that had died. I was really concerned about him because his wife had dementia, and I wasn't told that outright, but it was very obvious that she was struggling. And so with the RVS, they have a support team that we can phone at any time. And then any concerns, they will put you through to the problem-solving team, who work really closely with safeguarding as well. I also am really involved with a Facebook group, and that was an unofficial group, but we had over 10,000 members on there. And it was really helpful to just point people in the right direction, because the guidance over the months changed as the scheme evolved. And it's so important that we follow procedures. So, for example, we always had to withhold our phone number so that people couldn't phone us back, which was hard, especially with older people who they wanted that reassurance of what being able to contact you. And I felt awful having to say no, but because it was part of our role, that I just had to say that as a matter of fact. So always felt really supported by the RVS and that phone call. They were open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for us to phone in. So that was a really important part of that.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. Mm-hmm. And the Facebook group that you mentioned leads on nicely to a question we've had here from Victoria, who's asked if you've made any friends with your fellow volunteers throughout your volunteering experience.
So I guess with the vaccine stewards, I have obviously met people in real life, but with the Facebook group, I think because I was so actively involved answering questions, and I almost have a photographic memory, so I was able to recall all the guidance. And so if people were putting on questions, I was often the person to answer. And again, at the start in Salisbury, I think because there were lots of local COVID groups that were set up to support local people, I didn't have that many alerts in the first few weeks. So I felt I could use my volunteering time to help with this Facebook group. I then became a moderator of it, so it became a bit more. But through that, you can see the same names coming up all of the time. But it is interesting that I haven't met anyone else in Salisbury that I know that does it. But as I have said, I know that there are other people, but no, I haven't met them.
Oh, well, it's good to know that they're there and you can see them on the map, can't you, when you go onto the app?
Yeah.
I think we've probably got time for one last question here. So Kelsey has asked, will you continue volunteering once COVID becomes less of a pressing issue?
That's a really good question, because it has, obviously we've noticed that people aren't needing us as much, but that is not to say that people don't need us. And I know it can depend on which part of the country people are in, but there's very much still a need for help. I'm also the volunteer rep on the advisory board for the scheme. And so I have been party to some conversations about how the scheme will evolve. And so it's really important that people understand that there will be things coming from this, and they are very desperate to hold on to these amazing volunteers and see what might happen next. I also, now the pandemic is over, I volunteer with a wonderful charity called Horatio's Garden and a charity called End Circles, which is for homeless people in Salisbury. And so I think it has really opened my eyes to the need, even in a lovely place like Salisbury, in the need for volunteers. And so I would definitely be on the lookout, firstly, to carry on with the RVS volunteering as it is. And I know that the RVS already had volunteers in place in hospitals and with phone calls already. So there's so many different ways that we should be signposting all the willing volunteers we've had already.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Juliet. It sounds like volunteering just will be a part of your life now, and that's just so lovely to hear.
Absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of signposting, I think that brings the session to a close really nicely. So thank you so much for your time today, Juliet, and for sharing your stories and your experience with us. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in and posted questions. We hope that your story, Juliet, will inspire lots of people out there to want to find out more about volunteering. So if anybody does, if you're interested in becoming a NHS Volunteer Responder like Juliet, you can visit nhsvolunteerresponders.org.uk or call 0808 196 3646, or to find out more about Royal Voluntary Service roles in your local area, you can visit royalvoluntaryservice.org.uk. We'll pop all of the contact details in a link below, along with a link to the 5 NHS steps to mental wellbeing. So thank you all so much for listening, and thank you again, Juliet.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye.